Hey there, if you're listening to this, you are part of our podcast community. And because of that, I know you care deeply about your kids' health and you want to give them the best chance of staying well, especially through the winter months. But if your child is constantly sick and snotty and it feels like they're bouncing from one infection to the next, or if you're a proactive, crunchy mama who wants to do everything you can to support your kids' health through the winter, this is for you. I'm excited to invite you to my free Kids Immunity Masterclass. You can head on over to www.naturalsuperkids.com/winter to sign up. In this practical and empowering masterclass, I'm going to be sharing why your child keeps getting sick and how to break the cycle, the top foods, nutrients, and remedies to build strong immune defenses, hidden immune disruptors in your child's environment and what you can do about them, and our Natural Super Kids 4 Pillars framework for healthy, resilient kids. So whether you are already on a natural health journey or you're just starting out, this masterclass will give you simple, effective ways to support your child's immune system this winter and beyond. It's completely free. Just head to naturalsuperkids.com/winter to save your spot. I can't wait to see you there. Welcome to the Natural Super Kids podcast, where you will discover practical strategies to inspire you to boost the health and nutrition of your kids. I'm Jessica Donovan, a qualified naturopath specialising in kids' health, and I want to make it as easy as possible for you to raise healthy and happy kids. Let's get into it. Welcome back to the podcast. Today we're talking about fevers, and I'm going to be sharing 3 things that you need to know as a parent about fevers. Now, this is part 3 of our immunity series. If you missed part 1 and 2, you can go back and listen to those. They're not in a particular order. They're very different topics, but a couple of weeks ago, we spoke about the 5 food hacks to boost your child's immune system. And then last week, I shared the 3 questions you want to ask before giving your child antibiotics. And so today we're talking about fevers, and I love this topic. It always goes really well when we talk about fevers, especially on Instagram. We always get lots of engagement, lots of conversations happening, because this topic is something that, rightly so in so many ways, parents are worried about. You know, as parents, we jump to fixing a fever way too soon. And this information is, not readily available. And a lot of parents don't understand fevers in the way that I'm going to talk about them today. So I'm going to share my natural perspective, my naturopathic perspective on why fever is not something to fear and how to confidently support your child through one. Now, I think this fever fear is exacerbated by, the fact that we have access to so much information these days, and also the advertising that is around making fever medication, like here in Australia it's paracetamol and ibuprofen, seem like something that we should be using if we really care about our kids. And I'm going to talk about why, some myths around that a lot of parents don't understand as well. So I know that as a parent, there's not many more things more stressful than watching your child, particularly if they're young, spike a fever, especially when it's happening in the middle of the night, which often it is. But I really want you to know that fever is not the enemy. In fact, fever is a good sign that your child's immune system is kicking into gear. Yes, there are certain times when we want to be very careful about fevers, and I'm going to talk about that in this episode. And this is particularly around young children, particularly, under 3 months old, and even under 12 months old. But I'll go into that in a little bit more detail. But really, this episode is about me sharing 3 important things that you should know as a parent about fever and what's actually happening in the body, when to give medicine and when not to give medicine, and what to really focus on when your child is unwell. So when I say when not to give medicine, of course, like this is not direct health advice, but I want you to just question at times whether the medicine is absolutely necessary. So let's talk about the 3 things. The first thing is that fever is a healthy immune response. So I think fever needs to be reframed as helpful, not harmful. Next time you're feeling that fever come on in your child, reframe it in your mind as this is their body fighting an infection generally. There are several reasons why allowing a fever to run where appropriate is actually beneficial for kids. So fever stimulates immune function. When the body temperature rises, the immune system becomes more efficient, speeding up white blood cells and increasing the production of antibodies. So if we suppress the fever too early with medication, it can interfere with this natural immune response and slow recovery. I want to share a quick story of my daughter. She's 15 now, so she's not little anymore. And this has happened less and less as she's gotten older. But she was that kid that would get a really a fever, a real fever, like a really hot fever. And she would go downhill quickly and she would spike a fever. But, when I was brave enough and had enough information to feel comfortable to leave it within certain parameters, of course, and we're going to be talking about that, she would be better in an instant, like not in an instant, but the next day she would wake up and she would be better. If I reached for the fever medication and brought that fever down, yes, it was sort of reassuring at the time because she was more comfortable and I was more comfortable, but the illness would inevitably last for longer. She wouldn't bounce back quickly. She wouldn't recover as quickly. So remember that fever stimulates immune function. The other thing that fever does is it slows the growth of infectious microbes. So many viruses and bacteria thrive at normal body temperature. One of the reasons our body heats up is because it makes the environment less hospitable for the microbes to grow and spread. So remember, again, when we're thinking about the fever and we're feeling nervous about it, or we're feeling like, oh, I just want this fever to go away, that environment that's creating within the body is helping the body fight the infection. The other thing about fever is it encourages rest and recovery. When kids have a fever, they slow down, they rest, they might sleep. And this is exactly what their body needs to do to funnel their energy into healing and fighting the infection. Again, if we give medication too quickly, or if we're giving medication to reduce a mild or moderate fever, kids will perk back up, they'll start running around, they'll start using up those precious nutrients and energy needed to fight off the infection. Nature has a funny way of, making things happen as they should. There's always a reason that things are happening. So whenever possible, let the fever run its course. Of course, we want to monitor it closely, and I'm going to be sharing a bit more about, red flags and when we might want to jump in and use fever medication or seek medical advice. But in many cases, a fever is one of the body's best tools for healing. And hopefully just that point alone helps you see fever in a different light. Point 2. The second thing that I want you to know about fever is that fever medications, things like paracetamol, ibuprofen, don't prevent febrile convulsions, and these medications come with risks. So a lot of us will jump to fever medication and bring down that fever because we're scared of febrile convulsions or febrile seizures. Now, febrile convulsions are often caused by the sudden rise in temperature, not the absolute number of the temperature. So often as parents, we're focused on the number on the thermometer. Is it 38? Oh my gosh, it's 39. That is not the most important thing. The more important risk is how quickly the temperature is rising. And fever medications like paracetamol and ibuprofen don't prevent this sudden rise in temperature, and so don't prevent febrile convulsions. So if you're giving these medications because you're scared of febrile convulsions, they don't have any impact on the risk of febrile convulsions. And more importantly, or as importantly, these medications come with risks that parents don't know about. So look, again, I don't want to be anti-medication here. I have certainly given my kids paracetamol and ibuprofen. I'm not anti these medications, but I like to make parents aware that we want to question if these medications are necessary. What a lot of people don't know about Panadol or paracetamol, and again, the ads that we see for paracetamol given to, very young babies, it's gentle, it's effective. Why would we feel any sort of hesitation to give it to our kids? What we want to know, what I want you to know is that paracetamol depletes glutathione, and glutathione is the body's master antioxidant, if you like. And that supports immune function. It also supports detoxification. The odd dose of paracetamol is not going to be a problem for most kids. But if we're giving Panadol over and over again, I remember a friend of mine in the very early days of parenting, we were like polar opposites in our parenting styles. And I was a naturopath back then, so I'd question, giving my kids medications like paracetamol. We had babies the same age, and this particular friend used to give her son Panadol before he went to bed, just in case he had teething pain. Not even like that he was teething. So I think this is where a lot of parents think it's completely fine to use as often as possible, and not as often as possible, as often as needed, or even as prevention, and it's just not the truth. So paracetamol can deplete glutathione levels. The other thing a lot of people don't know about paracetamol is there are links with paracetamol, asthma, and allergic conditions. So studies have shown that increased paracetamol use in infancy is associated with higher risks of asthma, eczema, and other allergic diseases later in life. So these medications, although, relatively safe, do have risks involved. So this is why we want to question whether they're needed or not. When it comes to Nurofen or ibuprofen, there's obviously gut harms. Ibuprofen, can cause digestive upset, stomach ulcers, gastrointestinal bleeding. This is why we never want to give ibuprofen on an empty stomach. To children, ibuprofen can also affect kidney health and is linked to complications in respiratory infections as well. So studies have shown higher rates of complications like pneumonia in children given ibuprofen during respiratory illnesses. So there's things to think about. There's reasons that we don't want to reach for these medications more than necessary. And as I said, this point that I want you to know is that fever medications, paracetamol, ibuprofen, do not prevent febrile convulsions. So, of course, these medications have a place. They're especially helpful for comfort or for pain relief, but they're not always needed for every fever. The third thing I want you to know about fevers is I've already kind of alluded to this, but I want to talk a little bit more about this. Don't focus on the number, the actual temperature. Here in Australia, we're talking about, Celsius, degrees Celsius. And a lot of parents, as soon as they see, that degrees Celsius, head on over, heading towards 39, they think they need to take action. We get fixated by the number on the thermometer, but your child's behavior and general appearance is far more important than the exact temperature. I'm not saying we don't want to take any notice of the temperature, because we certainly do, but there can be a lot of varying factors when it comes to that temperature, the reading on the thermometer. Some kids might be 39 degrees and be actually kind of acting kind of normal, and another child might be a bit lower than that and might be kind of floppy and starting to become non-responsive. So that is, we want to take note of our child's behavior and general appearance much more than the number on the thermometer. So rather than focusing on the number, we want to look at whether they are alert or responsive. Even if they're tired, we want to make sure that they're staying alert and responsive. They're staying hydrated. So we want to make sure they're drinking, and we want to make sure they're urinating. They've got wet nappies. If they're, babies, they've got saliva, all those sort of signs that they are hydrated or that they're not becoming dehydrated. Is their breathing normal? Are they improving with rest? How long has the fever lasted? Is it, heading up or is it heading down? So we want to be treating the child and not the number. Health Direct have a really great infographic. If you Google, I'll make sure that the link is in the show notes as well. But if you Google Health Direct fever infographic, it's a really good guide as to what to do with fever. It's, it's a medical based resource. And if you're a Natural Super Kids Club member, we've included that infographic in our fever cheat sheet, as well as our recommendations of what to do when your child has a fever. So you can look at that if you're a club member, but if you're not, you can Google Health Direct fever infographic, and it basically takes you through a chart of, is their temperature higher or lower than this? Are they, are they this age or are they that age? Have they got these other symptoms? So by no means is that an exhaustive list of what to look for instead, but they're some of the key things: alert, responsive, hydrated, are they breathing normally, are they improving with rest, and how long has the fever lasted. Now, I do want to put a little bit of red flag or warning here. We want to be very careful with fever in babies, in infants and babies under 12 months. So if you have a baby under 3 months of age with a fever over 38 degrees Celsius, the medical recommendation is to go straight to emergency. If you have a baby aged between 3 and 12 months with a fever over 38 degrees Celsius, the recommendation is to see a doctor immediately. So we don't want to muck around with fevers in young babies, because they can go downhill much quicker, and obviously they're much more vulnerable. So although I've talked about fever fear and that there is too much fever fear, we do want to be very cautious in very young children, particularly children under 12 months. So I get it. Fevers can be stressful. But I do hope that this episode has helped you feel more informed, more in control, and more confident next time your child spikes a fever. Remember that the fever in itself isn't dangerous. It's often a sign that your child's immune system is doing exactly what it should do. Of course, always trust your gut and seek medical attention if something doesn't feel right. But with these 3 insights that I've shared today, I hope you feel better equipped to know when to monitor and when to act. Thanks so much for listening. And if you feel like this episode could be helpful to someone, please send it to them. If you'd like to share it with your community, your friends, you can screenshot it, tag us, share it on your Instagram stories. The more people that we can get this information out to about fever fear, or about not fearing fever, and the fact that fever is part of a healthy immune response, the better. Thanks so much for listening. Thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today. Head on over to our website, naturalsuperkids.com, for the show notes for this episode, as well as a whole heap of inspiration to help you raise healthy and happy kids. I'll see you next week. Hey, before you go, I want to remind you, you can say goodbye to those snotty sick days this winter and support your child's immunity the Natural Super Kids way. Come along to my free masterclass. Head on over to naturalsuperkids.com/winter to save your spot, to discover natural proven ways to help your kids stay healthy through the winter without relying on antibiotics, endless doctor visits, or over-the-counter medications. There are 2 live sessions to choose from. I can't wait to see you there. naturalsuperkids.com/winter. Go and save your spot now.